for this week's assignments, that would be great. Then I'll answer questions about assignments. And then after that, I'm going to talk about the AP exam and sort of what that format is going to look like. And then I'll start to talk about the Silk Roads, and we'll probably talk more about that on Wednesday. I don't think we'll get through all of the Silk Roads. All right, so your assignments for this week, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what they look like. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. And we'll start with the first assignment that you have to do this week is the first thing that you're going to get is you're going to get a Unit 2 reading that's going to look like this, okay? And so it's a summary of all the information for Unit 2, okay, organized by topics 2.1, 2.2, etc. So you're going to look this over first. You don't have to read it all the way through. I mean, you can skim it. This is something that I would save to your computer, okay, because this is going to be something that you may want to pull out during the AP exam. Remember that during your AP exam, it's open book, it's open notes. This is from a book, it's from a textbook. So this might be something that you might want to save to your desktop or somewhere where you can have access to it during the AP exam. And I'm going to give you one of these for all 6 of the units that are being tested so that you will have access to all of them. So you'll look this over first. Then what you're going to do, okay, is you're going to answer all of the questions on the Unit 2 review sheet. Now, what you'll notice is that the questions are all organized by topic, okay? And then this stuff right here, these page numbers correspond to the page numbers in the reading. So like here's page 77, and that first set of questions goes from 77 to 80, okay? So like these questions right here, topic 2.1, A, B, and C, okay? You will find answers to those questions on pages 77 to 80, okay? And then just like the ones down here, A through D for 2.2 go from 85 to 91, etc. Okay, so you're going to use that first reading to answer these questions. This is a review sheet for the entire unit, okay? And so this is also something that you'll want to, once you finish typing it out, save a copy for yourself. If you have the capability to print, you might want to print it. If you don't, it's okay. But you'll definitely want to save this somewhere where you can access it, okay? Because this is absolutely going to be something that you can use to help you during the AP exam. And this might be easier than using the reading pages because you'll notice this is already organized by topic, okay? And it's already broken down to kind of essential information. And so you'll be completing one of these also for each of the 6 units that are on the test. That way you can refer to this as you need it as well. So the whole purpose of this review for units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the whole purpose of it is to give you tools that you can use during the test. Since the test is now open book and open notes, I want to give you things that you can pull out easily that are going to be quick and easy references for you to be able to use for yourself during your AP exam, okay? So that's the reason for this. So that's the first assignment for this week. Hold on, there's a couple questions in the chat. Let me get there. Elias, yeah, Elias, the test is on May 21st. If you go back, for those of you that missed the last lesson, if you go back and you look either at the last video that I posted, or if you look at the post that I made explaining the last exam, you will see all of that information there, okay? So you can still find it. All right, so the second assignment for this week is, I had guessed completely wrong the other week when I said, oh, it's probably, yes. Hello, Alejandro.
Sorry.
I had guessed completely wrong the other day when I said, oh, because it's 45 minutes, it's probably going to be SAQs. And so for last week, I gave you SAQs to practice, which by the way, they were pretty good, the ones that I've graded already. I'll grade the batch that was submitted yesterday. I'll grade those today. But I guessed completely wrong on that, and they actually went with a DBQ. So your assignment for this week, your second assignment for this week, is actually going to be practicing stuff that you're going to have to do for the DBQ. Okay, so what I did is I gave you a DBQ prompt related to Unit 2, and it's in the file that looks like this, but the question is right here. Evaluate the extent to which women exercised power and influence within various societies in Afro-Eurasia during the period 1200 to 1450. And then I gave you 5 documents, okay, one of which is visual, which is what your test is going to be, okay? And so then for this assignment, you're not doing a whole DBQ, okay? All I asked you to do, this particular assignment, all I asked you to do was to first do the contextualization, okay? And then I explained what you were supposed to do. And then in italics here, this is what the rubric says you have to do, okay? So I want you to come up with your contextualization for that prompt. Yes? I want you to write your thesis for that prompt. And then lastly, you have to provide 2 pieces of outside evidence. You can use the review sheet that you filled out already if you've done it. You know, you can use your reading, you can use your textbook, use whatever you want, okay? But you need to come up with 2 pieces of outside evidence. And the reason it's 2 and not 1 is because if you look at the new rubric that they're using for this year's exam, you can get a second point for using a second piece of outside evidence, okay? So it's 2 pieces, whoops. It's 2 pieces of outside evidence instead of 1. All right, so before we get to talking about the exam a little bit, if you have any questions about your assignments for this week, okay, now would be a good time to ask them. Exam questions, hold off on, because I'm going to talk about those next. So right now, I just want to take any questions about the test itself. So if you have a question, go ahead and unmute your mic, and now will be the time to ask. No?
So it's going to be a DBQ?
What'd you say?
It's going to be a DBQ?
Yep, 1 DBQ with 5 documents.
And one of them is a picture?
Well, either a picture or a graph or a chart, something visual, a map, okay?
Sir, what are you eating?
An apple?
Can I have some?
Sure, here.
Thank you.
You're
I got it.
Any other questions about homework? Okay.
Why?
Why what?
Do we have to do this?
You have to do 2 assignments every week. Apparently, some of your other teachers are giving 5 assignments a week. So, I mean, if you'd like me to give you an assignment every day, I could do that.
Never mind.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
I'm good.
No,
thanks.
We're fine. Thank you for the
That's
generosity, but we're okay.
Yeah,
That's what I thought. Oh, Alexis is here. Hello, Alexis. Alexis, did you see the information I posted about your AP Music Theory test that you're asking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So now let's go ahead and I want to talk about what your exam is going to look like. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again. And now we're going to look at, so I posted this the other day as well, but they came up with a modified rubric for this year's exam. And when I heard that they were doing that, my first thought was, oh, it's going to be fewer topics. They're going to get rid of the complexity point and they're going to make it simpler. But leave it to the College Board to actually make it harder. Because instead of reducing the number of points that you can earn for the DBQ, they increased it from 7 up till 10, okay? And so I posted this rubric on the page, so you already may have seen this, but if you take a look at the rubric, okay, the first 2 points are exactly the same. Nothing has changed. The thesis point hasn't changed at all, and the contextualization point hasn't changed at all. So that's zero changes. That is exactly the same. But then if you look down here at the evidence, okay, this is where this has gone from 3 points to 5 points. Okay, and so this is where I think it's really easy for you to earn points, because you can earn 1 point, okay, if you use the content of 2 of the 5 documents, okay, to address the prompt. So if you use 2 of the 5 documents, okay, now that doesn't mean quote, that means describe what's in 2 of the 5 documents. You get a point, okay? So you get a point for that, okay? To earn a second point, okay, to earn a second point for this, okay, you get supporting an argument using 2 of the documents. So if you use the documents, if you don't just describe what's in them, but you use the documents to support your argument, 2 of them, you get a second point. So now we're up to 2 points. To get the third point, you need to use 4 of the 5 documents. Okay, so you can earn 3 points for this right here, just for using 4 of the documents. Also, pay attention here. I think it's really important to note, okay, that you only have to use, to get all of the points, you only have to use 4 of the 5 documents. So that might be something you want to keep in mind while you're taking this test under a very limited amount of time, that you can still earn all of the points by only using 4 of the 5 documents. So if there's a document that you look over that makes 0 sense to you whatsoever, you have no idea what it's saying, you have no idea what it means, if it doesn't make any sense at all to you, because you have such limited time, my recommendation would be not to spend too much time on it. Just go ahead and move on, okay, because you can still earn all of your points. Then for evidence beyond the documents, this increased from 1 point to 2. If you use 1 piece of evidence that's not in any of the documents, you get 1 point. If you use 2 pieces of evidence that's not within the documents, you can get 2 points now, okay? So 2 pieces of outside evidence, you earn 2 points. The reason that they did this, and the reason that I think this will be 2 easy points for you to earn, is because remember, you have access to your notes, you have access to your books now, okay? So you can easily find and pull information that you could use as outside evidence. So I think these are also going to be 2 points that hopefully would be fairly easy for you to earn, okay? And then we get down here to the end. This is the sourcing category, okay? So this is sourcing, okay, and point of view. You get 1 point for sourcing 1 document, 1 point for sourcing a second document, okay? This is like similar to, so in a regular year, on the regular rubric, you used to get a point for sourcing 1 of the documents, and then a second point for sourcing 3 out of the 7. Instead of 3 out of 7, it's 2 out of 5, okay? So you get 2 points for sourcing. 2 documents, 2 points. And then lastly, and I don't know why, but they did, lastly, they kept the complexity point exactly the same, okay? That is the 10th point. Once again, this is a point that I tell you not to worry about until you've done the other 9 things. Okay, don't make yourself crazy about the complexity point until you've earned these other points, especially because there's 5 or 6 points here that I think are, you know, pretty easy for you to earn if you do this well, especially now considering you have access to your notes and you have access to your textbook and assignments and everything like that. I think where you're going to get the most bang for your buck is by focusing a lot on the use of the evidence, okay? Because that's half the points. That's 5 out of 10, right there. So that's kind of where I'd start. All right, so let me come back here. Oops, let me come back and we'll go ahead now. And now I'll take questions about the exam. Okay, let me see. There's some questions in the chat. Hold on. Okay. So somebody asked before, weren't we using 6 out of the 7? Ideally, yes. Now, when you had more time, I always told you to use 7 out of 7. Okay, but now, given how limited the time is, you know, I think we need to start thinking about if there's a document that you really do not understand, stick to using just the ones that you know. Okay, are you going to post this rubric on Teams or on Remind? It's already posted on Teams. I can already send, I can send it out on Remind too, if you like, but it's already up on Teams. You have to scroll back to Friday afternoon. That's when I posted it. Do we know what the topic is? No, we do not know. All we know is that it's going to be something coming from units 1 through 6. That's all we know about the topic at this point. My guess is that it's probably going to be about a topic that's going to be kind of broad and that might stretch across multiple units. So it might be something about government. It might be something about trade. Okay, but those are guesses. All right, 45 minutes. Yes, that's all you have to do. This is 45 minutes. Okay, can you say bruh? There you go, bruh. Okay. How many points are needed to pass? We don't know that yet. Okay, they won't decide what a passing score is until all the exams have been graded and they can kind of set up a bell curve. So they will like set up a curve after all the exams are graded, and they might say, okay, scores of 9 and 10 get a 5, scores of 7 and 8 get a 4, 5 and 6 get a 3, or something like that. But they won't decide what the range is, what the weight is. They won't decide what that is until they've graded all of the exams and they can see an average. And so like if it turns out that the national average on the exam was say a 6, and I'm just making this up, okay, then they would make 6 would be a 3. So they would make that a 3. Okay, so it's all about what the average is. Okay, no, you cannot FaceTime me during the test or Zoom me or anything like that. You won't have time. Okay, I mean, you have 45 minutes to type and then upload this answer. And so one of the things that I might recommend to you, okay, right, yes, it is off of everybody in the entire country. It's not just your school scores or our state scores or anything like that. It's an average of the entire country. Actually, it's an average of the entire world, because there are lots of different countries that'll be taking this test. And what's kind of weird about the test this time is everybody that is taking the AP World exam will be taking it at the same time, which means the people that are taking this test in other parts of the world, there's like the people in the Far East have to sit down and write this essay at 2 o'clock in the morning, because everybody has to take it at the same time, because once the question is out there, it's out there. So in order to prevent cheating, no, Jen, you can't get a Spanish version. In order to prevent cheating, everybody has to take it at once. So people in other parts of the world are going to be taking these tests in like the middle of the night. Won't the program crash due to overload? That's kind of the million-dollar question. I don't know the answer to that. You know, that's certainly something that I think is a concern. And it's one of those things I would tell you, like when you get to the 43-minute mark, I would tell you, you probably need to start uploading around 43 minutes. You don't want to wait till there's like 10 seconds left to try to go submit, okay? Because you don't want to run into problems with that. So I would be careful. I would give yourself a minute to a minute and a half, maybe even 2 minutes to allow yourself to upload, just because, you know, this is like a great unknown. Now, one of the things I will tell you is that our exam, AP World exam, is near the end. I would be terrified if it was the first exam, because nobody knows what's going to happen. Okay, ours is near the end of the exam window. And so whatever bugs, whatever kinks they have in this online system, they probably should have worked out by then. So that's kind of a good thing for us, is that we don't test until the end of the window. I forget which exam is first, but I would be worried if I had one of the early exams, because we just don't know what's going to happen with this system. So it's definitely a concern, but it's something that we cannot worry about. That is the College Board's problem, not ours. So on that note, what questions do you have about your exam that you want me to answer right now? If you have a question, go ahead and turn your mic on and I'll be happy to answer. Nobody has any exam questions? I'm shocked. They will have a practice exam kind of thing up that you can practice with. So they said that would be up by the end of April. So it'll be like 3 to 4 weeks or so before the test. So you can go in and you can practice as many times as you want. You can, like, I would advise you doing it at least once, even if you don't answer the practice question. I would advise logging in at least once so that you can see what the interface is going to look like. You can see what the screen is going to look like. You can see where the timer is, just so that you are familiar with what it's going to look like, so that when you take the test, it's not the first time that you've seen it. Because right now, I don't know what it looks like either. Okay, so I'll be doing that for myself. One of the things that's going to be different and is going to be, I guess, a little weird at first, is that the documents are going to be on the computer. Okay, so it's not like the test where you can mark the documents and you can make any notes and things. They're all going to be online. So you're going to have to I would have a piece of scrap paper or like a notebook or something out in front of you so that you can make your notes about the documents on paper. Okay, because you're not going to have a actual printout of those documents. So I think that's something else that's going to be a little different this year that you want to consider. Okay, login information, that'll all come out before the test. It's going to be your regular College Board login. So you'll be on the computer at 2 o'clock. You will log in, and apparently when you log in, there's going to be like this little message that comes up that'll say log into your AP World History exam, and then that'll take you to the test. Okay, but I think all of those details will be forthcoming probably when they release the practice version that you can look at. Okay. Do we know the exact test date? Yes, we do. It's May 21st, and it is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, and that time is not a suggestion. That is when it is going to be. So, that is a date and that is a time that is non-negotiable. Okay, if we're back at school by then, that means that you'll be staying after school that day to take the test. Okay, if we're out of school, that means like probably that day about 1:50 or so, you need to be setting up a quiet place somewhere in your house where you can sit for 45 minutes to write the test. So if you need to find headphones or something to drown out outside noise, that's something that you want to do. Okay, but it is going to be important for you to find a place and a space from 2 o'clock to 2:45 that day where you can work on this. Okay, what happens if you're late? Okay, the timer starts at 2 o'clock, so you want to be logged in before then. If you're late, it means you're going to have less time. I'm sorry if you tend to be late to very important things, whomever that is, communist nuke. That must be Jorge, if I had to guess. If you log in at 2:05, then the timer is going to show that you have 40 minutes instead of 45. So you're really just kind of hurting yourself at that point in time. Okay. All right. Other questions about the exam? Any other exam related questions? None at all? Okay. I will have my office hours this afternoon. So if you have any questions about it, then you can ask me then. You can ask me on Wednesday. Like any of those times are fine. Okay. Can we listen to music during the test? There's nothing that says that you can't. Okay. There's no way that they can police that. Okay. And so if that's something that helps you focus, by all means do it. Okay. But yeah, there is no way that they can police that. There's no way that they can say no. You know, I recommend wearing a pair of headphones, even if it's just to kind of drown out other noise within your house. You know, it's really weird. We're all working from home, you know, like, you know, we see like if somebody walks into the kitchen or turns on the television or, you know, all of those things could be distracting. So I actually would recommend putting something on so that you can drown out any of that outside noise, okay, that might be happening, okay? Even if it's not music, okay? You know, but yes, they do say classical music helps people focus, okay? So Jan, if you want to go with the Mozart and the Beethoven, by all means. Kayla, if the Minecraft music helps you focus, then go for it. Whatever works for you. Okay, but you definitely want to drown out any outside noise. All right. What, Jan? You're going to listen to Cats? Like the musical? The cat roar. Okay. All right. We're going to move on now. Or hey, you can't play your soundboard during the test. That's probably going to be a no. So you're gonna have to keep your soundboard off. All right. So let's talk about trade. We've got 25 minutes left, so I won't get all the way through trade today. We'll finish it up on Wednesday, and that's fine. But let's start to talk about trade. Okay. Olivia is recommending Tchaikovsky, also an excellent choice. All right, so let's jump to trade routes. There we go. Okay, so obviously our first and most important trade route, of course, is going to be the Silk Roads, okay? This is just one of those topics that appears on the exam every year when it's a longer exam, like when it's a real test. Who knows if it'll pop up this year? Maybe the DBQ question will relate to this in some way, but like the Silk Roads is just one of those topics that like every year, everybody's like hoping for like a question about these Silk Roads, because I feel like everybody knows these really, really well, okay? And so I wanna first direct everybody's attention to this map. And the reason why I want to show you this map is because this kind of gives you an idea of who was doing trading at that time, where that trading was going, who the major players were, okay? And so if you look, you know, obviously we know we have China over here in the Far East, okay? Most of this is going to be the Tang and the Song dynasty in terms of the time period. Okay, even further east, we've got the Japanese. Okay, I think we knew that. We've got the Muslims over here in that purplish color. Okay, and then you've got the Byzantines a little bit further north. And then notice up here in Scandinavia, up in Northeast Europe, you have the Vikings. Okay, now our Silk Roads trade though is going to be represented by these dotted lines. Okay. That's what's going to make up the Silk Roads trading routes, okay? As well as, if you notice also, it also kind of very neatly aligns with the border of the Mongols, okay? And that's not by coincidence, okay? The Silk Roads trade route, as I've mentioned to you before, the Silk Roads trading network goes right through the Mongol Empire, okay? So that's no kind of coincidence. All of the stars on the map represent major trading cities. It's important to note that the people over here in North and South America in the Western Hemisphere have no idea that any of this exists. And the people in the Eastern Hemisphere obviously have no idea that the Western Hemisphere exists. The Vikings are the first ones to figure it out. but they don't really trade with many, many people outside of their own civilization, so nobody hears about it, okay? So these are your major trading empires that are happening at this time. This is all Silk Roads over here. The Incas traded, but they didn't really trade long distance, okay? They traded some with the north, empires up north, but they certainly didn't trade with the Asians or with the Europeans, okay? And so one of the things that's going to really spur the movement towards these trade routes is going to be that there comes to be a desire for luxury goods, okay? People want access to luxury products, things like textiles and porcelain, spices, okay, precious metals. All of those things lead to a new desire for trade, okay? And so it is that desire for goods coupled with these new inventions, okay? Things like the saddle, the astrolabe, the caravanserai that are going to sort of spur this kind of international trading network, okay? And so what we're looking to talk about today and then tomorrow is to explain the causes and effects of the growth of networks of exchange. That's the sort of objective for all of this. Okay, so here is again another map of the Silk Road. Notice again how it kind of very, very neatly almost ties in very nicely with the Mongols, okay? There is a growth of this regional trade, okay, and this long distance trade, and that long distance trade leads to the development of a lot of what they call trading cities, okay, that are right along these Silk Roads. Look at the Chinese Empire here. This is the Tang and the Song dynasty. Notice that almost all of their major cities are on a trade route, even down here, okay, if you go down into India, okay? Notice again, all of these cities are pretty much located on a trade route. That is no coincidence, okay? Cities tended to spring up along existing trade routes, okay? Notice again, there's no major cities in this part of China. They were all about trade, okay? And so you need to understand the connection between the growth of these cities and of trade, okay? We're also seeing, okay, part of what is fueling this is a growing demand for luxury goods, okay? Things like porcelain, which you see up in the upper left-hand corner, textiles, which you see in the upper right-hand corner, okay? Animal fur, okay, like those tigers, okay? Tiger teeth, okay? Spices, gems, silk, okay? All of these things become very, very important luxury goods, okay, that the Europeans wanted to have access to, okay? And so this chart right here, I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you, but this chart gives you an idea of what sorts of products the East was shipping to the West on the Silk Roads. Some of them are very, oops, sorry, I dropped my mouse. There we go. Ha ha ha. Okay. Let's go back to that. There we go. Okay, so some of these items are very, very obvious, and we've talked about them before. You know, like we've mentioned silk before. Okay, obviously we talked about furs, animal furs. Okay, the saddle from those camels, textiles. Okay, spices. Okay, but then there's some on here that are a little bit stranger, a little bit different. Okay, who would have thought at the time, for example, olive oil was going to be considered a luxury good, okay? Or like almonds, right? We take almonds for granted now, but at the time, almonds came from the Middle East and they were a luxury goods. Even weaponry like swords would have been considered luxury items, and these are all things that would have been traded along the Silk Roads, okay? Here's some porcelain for you. Notice again, what's kind of important and why this was such a valuable good, okay, is because porcelain, it's not about the material itself, it's about the hand painting and how elaborate it is that gets done on these dishes, okay? And so if you look at these, all of these designs that you see here, this was all hand painted. That's what makes porcelain so valuable. And even to this day, okay, that is what makes porcelain such a valuable product. Okay. We all know how silk is made, right? And why it is so valuable, because silk comes from mealworms, okay? It's a rather disgusting process. But that's the reason why silk, pure silk, is so expensive. And I think I've told you the story before about how China lost that, right? There was that Chinese woman who married the man, and she took the mealworms and that process with her when she left. And then it turned out that man, the European man, only married her because he wanted to know how to make silk. Most silk that is made today is what's called synthetic, which means it's a blend. It's not pure silk. That's why it's a lot less expensive. Pure silk is still incredibly expensive, okay? But most silk that is made now is a blend. It's a synthetic. Okay, so silk production, okay, actually leads to roles for a lot of women. Okay, as I mentioned to you, for thousands and thousands of years, China actually had a monopoly on silk production. Okay, and that monopoly is something that they lose around the year 500 or so CE. Okay, now here's what's important about this trade in silk. The men handled all of the actual trade, whereas the women handled all of the production. So the women were making the silk, okay, and then the men traded it. Now, what that meant is that the women had to tend to the trees, okay, because the worms had to eat the leaves off of those trees. The women would then manually, one by one, unwind all of the cocoons that the worms wrap themselves into, okay? And then they would turn all of those fibers into thread and then weave all of those fibers into textiles. And most of that was work that was done at home, okay? Which is why women had such an important role in this, even during the Tang Dynasty, when they were pretty much required to sort of stay at home, okay? So the biggest takeaway here then is that the men were doing the trading, but the people producing the silk were the women, okay? And they would produce it in kind of setups like you see here. As you can see, this is a very elaborate process. It's multi-stepped, okay? It's not something that happens quickly, you know, and it's not something that happens cheaply, which is another reason why pure silk, again, is so expensive, okay? What they are doing here is they're taking a piece of silk and they're kind of flattening it out, smoothing it out, giving it that very, very smooth, very slippery feel that you are accustomed to when it comes to silk, okay? And so this kind of walks you through this whole process. You have to read this from right to left instead of from left to right, but it kind of walks you through this whole the whole process of making silk, okay? And so we know that silk was given to, you know, silk was a luxury item, okay? People in the Chinese government used it to bribe people with, okay? Romans wanted access to the silk, okay? Because this was something that they could use as a way to show wealth and to show status. Certain people use this as a means of currency, okay? You could trade silk as a means of actual currency, okay? In the Byzantine Empire and in China, only people who were of the upper classes or the more elite classes would be allowed to wear silk. So silk was absolutely a symbol of your social status. If you were wearing silk, you were thought to be of a higher class, okay? They would give them as gifts to the Buddhist monks, okay? And even in the Christian world, it was used as a cloth to put onto altars. It was used in the vestments that the priests wear, okay? And then eventually, by the 1100s, We even see it sprouting up in Western Africa, where those kings begin to wear silk once again as a means of showing their social role or their social status. Okay, silk was again also used as a trade good in the tribute system. Okay, and so what you have here is you have these nomads off to the left. Okay, and they are getting ready to trade a horse, okay, in exchange for silk, okay, and for other farming goods. Okay, so silk was used also in that tribute system. Okay, now the next important development is the development of the caravans. We know caravans are these groups of people that are all traveling at once, right? It was much safer and made a lot more sense for travel to be done, of course, in large groups. And so that is when the caravanserai first appear. Caravanserai, of course, we've talked about before, it's like your kind of earliest hotels. Okay, it's a place where people could stop for the night, they could rest, they could get themselves a room, okay, and kind of relax. And so generally what they were is it was kind of like a square or like a rectangular building with a courtyard that was in the middle of it. And that courtyard was where people would put their camels for the night. Okay, so if you look at that second photograph there at the bottom, you can see here that this was where the animals, particularly camels, would spend the night. And so what would happen is, as these people were all there, obviously there would be trading taking place here, but there was also, for the first time, people from different cultures are all communicating with each other. They are sharing ideas, they're trading goods, okay? And they are developing a system of trade that is going to kind of carry them through the next couple of centuries. So this is, caravanserai are going to be very important in terms of cultural exchange and in terms of sharing goods and sharing items, okay, sharing ideas. This is where you see a lot of culture spreading, okay? Also, and this is a weird one, you have the camel saddle becoming extremely important. Now, this is one of those things where we're like, what, a saddle? How important could a saddle possibly be, okay? Or how important could a stirrup possibly be? Stirrups, for those of you that don't know, that's where you put your feet in, okay? Well, here's the thing, okay? The stirrup and these camel saddles give a lot of support to the people that are riding them, which would allow them to travel much further distances, okay? They also eventually get used in warfare when we talk about using horses for all of that. But in terms of trade, when these people are traveling many thousands of miles, using a better saddle with a stirrup, okay, would give the rider much better support, which would allow them to travel, of course, a whole lot further, okay? And then, of course, again, it is the Mongols who are helping to kind of facilitate this trade, okay? During this period of what they call the Pax Mongolica, which means the peace of the Mongols, when there was a lot of stability, okay, because the Mongols weren't fighting anybody at the time, that sort of peaceful era allowed people to move goods across Asia like this, okay? And so it is eventually during this time that things like gunpowder and the compass would make their way to Europe, okay? And so again, I've showed this graphic a million times because it's something that I think is extremely important. China and the Muslims, okay, the East came up with all of these inventions so that by the time Europe gets to the Renaissance, Europe can take off and can run into the age of exploration, okay? So the Silk Roads, again, are also about spreading culture. Yes, the economic impact is extremely important, but we have to also understand what their role was as a conduit, which means a spreader of culture. One example of a cultural belief that was spread along the Silk Roads would be Buddhism, okay? Buddhism comes out of India and makes its way into Central and to East Asia because of the role of these merchants. Okay, now the merchants really like Buddhism, okay, because Buddhism has that universal message. And you can compare that, of course, to Hinduism, which had that very rigid case kind of structure. Remember that the Hindus said, well, if you're born into a low case, you're just kind of out of luck. It sucks to be you, and your life is going to be awful, but oh well, this is just what it is. Buddhism was much more about everybody and about improving your current situation. And so Buddhism, for that reason, right, has a great deal of appeal, okay? Now, there were some limits to the spread of it, okay? If you look at the map and you go west, okay, a belief system called Zoroastrianism prevented Buddhism from making its way any further west, okay? Zoroastrianism, I've mentioned before, it might be one of the earliest monotheistic faiths. It talks about, or rather it deals with, okay, a heaven and a hell, a good God and a bad God. So it's one of the kind of earliest beliefs that both Judaism and Christianity borrow certain things from. What is also important then about Buddhism is that it's spread, or rather is that it changes as it spreads. And these different cultures adapt Buddhism in such a way that they make it work within their own belief system. Okay, for example, originally Buddhism had nothing to do with wealth, and in fact said that material wealth was actually a bad thing. But when these merchants who are very, very rich, when they start to practice Buddhism, they shift things around a little bit, okay, to make it so that, well, actually wealth is not bad. Okay, and so they develop a new form of Buddhism called Mahayana Buddhism, okay? And the reason Mahayana Buddhism becomes very, very popular is because it doesn't focus on wealth. It doesn't really say anything about wealth being bad. And so these merchants and these traders are like, that's the one that we want, the one where it's okay to be rich. Okay, because Mahayana Buddhism focuses much more on compassion and on being nice to your neighbors, okay? And so if you take a look at this map here, you can see that there is almost a line here where Buddhism doesn't make it any further. And again, that is because that's where it runs into Zoroastrianism, okay? Now, the Buddhist monasteries, okay, they become, you know, they start to sprout up along the Silk Roads. And so what happens is, if you were a Buddhist merchant, okay, the way that you could kind of advance within this religion is by paying the money to build a monastery and paying monks to live and to work at that monastery, okay? And that actually worked out well for these merchants because it gave them a place to not only to rest, but to also gather additional supplies. And so a lot of cities ended up sprouting around all of these different monasteries. They become, again, centers of learning. They have extensive libraries and things like that, okay? So here's actually a Buddhist monastery. I think this is pretty cool. It's built right into the side of a mountain. So you see there is a large statue there for the Buddha, and then you have all the different rooms of the monastery that are built right into the side of the mountain, okay? Now, this chart right here, I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you, but this chart gives you an idea, okay, of how Buddhism changed as it spread. So you have the more traditional form of the Buddhist faith, which is Theravada Buddhism, and then you have the more liberal, newer form of Buddhism, which is Mahayana Buddhism. And you can see, looking at that chart, what some of the distinctions between the two forms of the faith are, okay? This map here gives you an idea, okay, of how Buddhism spread. Notice that it's tied, right, very neatly into the Silk Roads, okay? And so you can see this is Theravada Buddhism. This is the more traditional more conservative form of it, and then the orange area represents the more liberal, newer version of it, okay? And you can see how it, you know, kind of directly correlates with the Silk Roads, okay? Here's another example. This map shows, again, a very, very similar thing, okay? All right, so we've got just a couple minutes left. These caves right here, again, give you another idea of how Buddhism spread into China via the via the Silk Roads. Okay, this is in China, this particular photograph, by the way, so we can see that Buddhism has made its way into China. Now, the last thing that I'll talk about today, because it's kind of appropriate, is that Buddhism, right, is also responsible, or rather the Silk Roads are also responsible for spreading disease. Okay, we know that a lot of disease made its way out of Asia into Europe as a result of the Silk Roads. And that becomes a problem because the Europeans and the people further west, because these were new diseases, they did not have any kind of immunity built up to these diseases, and so they kind of ended up succumbing fairly often. Okay, one example of this would be smallpox. Okay, the measles would be another example. At the time, these were both devastating diseases. Nowadays, we have vaccines for both of them. Okay, but they at the time were a devastating disease. And so because so many people suffered during this time, because so many people were suffering as a result of this, okay, this is probably one of the reasons why Christianity became popular within Europe and why Buddhism became popular within China, because both of those belief systems offered people hope about a better world. And so they were suffering extensively in this world, that these belief systems gave them hope in another world, okay? And then, of course, the granddaddy of all of these diseases, right, would be the Black Death, okay? This comes out of China and comes into Europe. It is the most devastating of all of these diseases that are spread. And it actually kills, okay, about half of the world's population at the time and almost 3/4 of the European population. So it is a devastating disease, okay? And it is definitely, in terms of diseases that are spread along the Silk Roads, this was, you know, probably the biggest and the most well-known, okay? And this map right here gives you an idea of how the Black Death made its way into Europe, okay? So you can kind of trace it, right, starting over here, like in Asia, 1347, okay? Then we moved to 1348, 1349, 1350, 1351. So you can see how areas that were affected by the Black Death were all located along major trade routes, okay? All right, and so that's where I'm gonna stop for today. Well, no, I can do money super quick. It's only a couple of slides, okay? The other thing, the last thing, I know, I said this Friday too. The last thing that we need to talk about with regards to the Silk Roads is paper money, okay? Because there was all of this trading taking place, we had to move away from a barter economy, okay? And we had to move into an actual money economy. Okay, prior to this global trade, people were trading goods with each other directly. So they were saying, I'll trade you a pound of wheat for a spool of silk. That, by the way, is not a fair trade at all, but you get the idea, okay? But because we are seeing so many different cultures and so many different groups of people now, they have to move away from the barter economy, and they have to develop an actual money economy. And so now you are not trading goods for goods directly, you are trading goods for cash, okay? And so the Silk Roads lead us away from the barter economy into the money economy, okay? And it is that money economy that will ultimately be the downfall of the European feudal system that we talked about last Friday. Okay, because now that you have actual money, actual gold coins and actual money, paper money, okay? Whether it's paper or whether it's gold, it didn't matter. There was a way now to become wealthy without owning significant amounts of land, right? The feudal system was entirely dependent upon land being the only way to sort of accumulate wealth, okay? This extensive trading means that merchants could own very, very little land and still become extremely wealthy. And so the fact that owning land was no longer the only way to get rich, that's going to lead us to the end of the feudal system, okay? Or one of the things that's going to bring about the end of the feudal system. The Black Death, of course, is going to be the other one. Okay, so that does bring us to the end. Are there any questions before we wrap up for today? Yes, Blake, I was still going. Are there any questions before we wrap up today's call? Anybody have anything at all? No? Okay, so in that case, your work for this week is posted. I'll have office hours today starting at 1:30, so you can message me if you have any questions about that or the exam or anything else. I'll post the video a little bit later. And if there's no other questions, I hope you all have a wonderful Monday, and I will see you guys again on Wednesday. See you later, everybody.